Welcome back to the Not Just a Pony Ride podcast. I'm your host, Katie Ott, and today we have a requested episode from several listeners that want to learn more about this subject, and Amanda is the perfect expert to have on the show today. Welcome, Amanda.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here and share information about interactive vaulting.
Absolutely. Well, before we get into the nuts and bolts of vaulting, why don't you tell everyone who you are and all your accomplishments as a woman in the EAS field?
So my name is Amanda Bubb, and I'm the lead instructor at Reins of Life in Michigan City, Indiana. In terms of the broader field of equine assisted services, I hold my PATH International certifications, CTRI, an equine specialist in mental health and learning, an interactive vaulting instructor, and a therapeutic driving instructor. So I'm a chronic certification collector. I also am a PATH International mentor, as well as an associate site visitor and faculty for the interactive vaulting certification.
Wow, you're a busy gal. Are you a lifelong learner?
I
Love
am,
to learn all the
yes.
time.
Yeah. And I started early. I picked up my what was then the registered instructor certification when I was still a college student.
Very good. So how did you find the EAS field? Are you also a lifelong horse person?
Well, almost lifelong. I started writing when I was a child. And I actually, as a high school senior, had an experience as a CHA certified writing instructor at an inclusive summer camp.
Cool.
And that kind of piqued an interest in therapeutic writing and serving people with disabilities. And from there, I actually went on and got my bachelor's degree in therapeutic writing. So have kind of been all in since then.
Where did you do your degree?
It was at St. Mary of the Woods, which no longer offers a major in therapeutic writing. They do offer a minor, which I develop and teach courses for.
Of course you do, with all your knowledge. I love that. Very good. Okay, so today we're going to talk about primarily interactive vaulting. And before we get started, will you give me the rundown on the terminology with vaulting? Because there's lots of different, obviously, sectors of vaulting. And so I'm a big terminology geek. I like to make sure I'm using the right words when I'm supposed to use them when. So can you give us a little rundown of that before we get started?
Yeah. So interactive vaulting is PATH's term. PATH offers a certification in interactive vaulting. And what makes it interactive, and this is one of the really cool things that I really hope more people can take away from this and understand about interactive vaulting, is the choice of the word interactive was very purposeful. Interactive vaulting is truly interactive. The students are interacting with each other. They're interacting with the horse. It's a very, very collaborative opportunity within the PATH International umbrella. I often kind of joke that interactive vaulting is almost like therapeutic riding and equine assisted learning got together and had a baby. Because while there are components of the vaulting lesson, like where you're teaching on the barrel, you're using the what, whys, and hows, it is very teaching focused. A lot of portions of an interactive vaulting lesson, the instructor is actually facilitating and playing off group dynamics and letting the group lead. So there really are moments that are those what, whys, and hows and the direct teaching and instruction, and also a lot of moments of facilitation, which makes it a really cool opportunity that works very well with some participants in our programs. There's also competitive vaulting, which I am not as knowledgeable in, although I do dabble in. I am a member of Equestrian Vaulting USA, which is the governing body in the United States for competitive vaulting. Like, they determine who we send to the World Equestrian Games, stuff like that. And I have taken some of Reins of Life's interactive vaulting students to competitions as well. So we've been able to kind of blend the interactive vaulting with PATH with some competition opportunities for our students. And that's been really cool. I've also heard the term adaptive vaulting. I I don't think it's a super prominent term, although it is one I've heard thrown around.
Okay. So the vaulting we're talking about today is interactive vaulting, which is what you're doing and what is certified through Path International.
Yes. Yeah.
Perfect. That helps me. Because we do not have a vaulting program at Hetra. And so I am really excited to learn, not only the benefits of vaulting and getting participants into programming like this, but also the kind of behind the scenes stuff that happens. Because I think, for me anyway, vaulting's kind of this thing that, because I don't know a lot about it, I'm like, oh my gosh, there must be a lot that goes into, starting that program and the safety of it all and all of that. So I'm excited to learn kind of the behind the scenes part too. So let's start with just, what vaulting is, kind of the benefit. I guess from a participant standpoint and why you're so passionate about that.
Yeah, so interactive vaulting is a great collaborative opportunity. It also tends to be pretty fast paced.
Mm-hmm.
So I've found, is it a great fit for every participant in our program? It is not, let's be real about that. Reins of Life also offers unmounted programming, therapeutic riding, therapeutic driving. We kind of do all of it. And some of the participants are definitely better set up for success in those other options. But interactive vaulting has been very beneficial for kids that like a fast-paced environment, that are physically able to move around. They're able to follow basic safety directions. So a lot of the students that have had a lot of success in our interactive vaulting program have been, on the autism spectrum, but maybe a little bit higher functioning. A lot of students with like ADHD or other learning disabilities have had a lot of success in interactive vaulting. And I think because it is so fast paced, it is so collaborative, it really allows them to skill build without realizing they are while they're having fun. One of the things that's really cool about the interactive vaulting is there's lots of like fun and games and movement. Like sometimes we'll host guests who are interested in interactive vaulting to just come watch a lesson. And one of the games that, we sometimes play is they will race the vaulting horse around the circle while the horse is being lunged, or we'll play duck, duck, goose. And there are, 6 children stationed around the outside of the circle, like yelling and cheering for each other and then running around while the horse is just kind of trotting around doing her thing. And so I think a lot of people are truly kind of surprised by how fast paced and movement based, and it, to an outside observer, it seems a little bit chaotic, but it's very controlled chaos.
That's probably a great word for it, controlled chaos. But I could see how, like you said, when you're selecting participants for this program or placing participants in this program, following directions and that safety awareness piece is really important because it is fast paced, right? So we know that from a safety standpoint, the faster things go, the quicker things go wrong, right? So is there, when you guys, okay, let me back up, rewind. If you do like an evaluation for a participant that comes to Reins for Life and you're looking at different programs for that participant, what's kind of the evaluation process for a participant that might enter the interactive vaulting program? Or do people mostly come to you and say, hey, I saw vaulting and I want to do this,
We have a few that specifically request it, but more it is participants who reach out. They want to participate in our program. The first thing that everybody thinks of is therapeutic riding. All of our programs require the same paperwork. They fill out the same, doctor's form and releases, whether they're being slotted into therapeutic riding, interactive vaulting, or driving. And then when they come for the evaluation and we meet the participant and we're talking about their goals and we're seeing them move around the barn and interact with horses, that'll give us a better idea. And then we will actually recommend, you might be most appropriate in our interactive vaulting, or you might be most appropriate in riding, or you might be most appropriate in driving. So generally, we've had a few who've specifically requested it. It's a recommendation from us upon, meeting and seeing the paperwork about we think this might actually be the best fit for you based on your goals and your needs.
Got it. Are your participants in the interactive vaulting program like how I would say like diverse are they? So do you have some participants that are able-bodied that don't have diagnoses that do your vaulting program and some that do have diagnoses?
Um, so yes and no. So Reins of Life also has a large collaboration with our local school system.
Cool.
Um, and interactive vaulting is one of the activities we utilize there. And not all of those students have a diagnosis, although they probably all qualify for one,
Mhm.
which is why they're in the program that is coming to the barn.
Right.
So we do have some students through our local school corporation that don't have a diagnosis, although all of the participants that are like being signed up by families or caregivers have some type of diagnosis, although we are very flexible with what diagnoses qualify, so it may
Yeah.
be ADD or learning disability or depression.
Right. Okay. So yeah, it's diverse in that sense. Okay, that makes
Yeah.
sense. So, I am a participant that comes for my first interactive vaulting session. I am stoked to learn about all of this. What does a session, typically look like? Could you tell me about maybe like what a beginning session would look like, and then kind of as they advance?
Yeah, and honestly, those two things aren't very different, except for the actual skills being practiced.
Cool.
Um, So generally with interactive vaulting, like I've said, it's very group based, it's very collaborative. The students come in, we generally start with some type of unmounted warm up activity, which usually takes the form of some type of game
Mhm.
or challenge. So it could be, and this is where, what game is chosen might depend on the students and their level of knowledge. So, for example, for interactive vaulting, the horse is working on a lunge line. And there are definitely safe ways to enter the circle and approach the horse and stuff like that. So, for a new participant or a new group who's never done this before, we might do a warm up activity that is learning how to exit and enter the circle safely.
Cool.
So, we'll talk about timing and how to come in, and then they'll get to go to the horse, and to make it some sort of learning game. Lots of times we'll put like a card or something on the horse that they collect and then take back out, and the group has to do what's on that card. I have some animal cards, so sometimes, we'll play a game where they have to, once they get a card, they have to mimic that animal and like make that noise or move around the circle like that animal or something like that.
Yeah, that
Um,
sounds fun.
for a more advanced skilled group, we might do an activity where they enter the circle and go alongside the horse and have to match their footfalls to the horse's footfalls.
Hmm.
And that might be at the walk, the trot, the canter. One of the things about interactive vaulting is because the horses are so well trained on the lunge line and the instructor is lunging them, so the participants aren't really being asked to direct the horse. They do tend to move at a faster pace and get to do faster gaits more quickly than in riding, for example. So it's not uncommon for a student to be trotting or even cantering fairly quickly. So they might be
Cool.
doing something like that where they're paying attention to the horse's footfalls and matching their footfalls, or maybe closing their eyes and trying to guess what gait the horse is in by listening to the horse. So any of those would be options for a warm up activity. Then the next step is generally the vaulting barrel. We utilize vaulting barrels and interactive vaulting to teach the forms and positions before they do them on the horse. Um, this is a great opportunity. Knees and elbows can be pokey and sharp. And even though the horses have very specialized vaulting equipment, those pads that we use are incredible in terms of protecting the horse. The barrel gives us an opportunity to, teach the student the position while emphasizing, hey, let's, point our toes towards Faye's tail instead of pointing our toes into her back.
Got it.
It also gives the student an opportunity to learn it in a less nervous situation.
Mhm.
That barrel is very stable, it's steady, it's not going to move. It might be slightly shorter than the horse. So it gives the students an opportunity to learn. And this is where we're really, as an instructor, going to utilize the what's, how's, and whys. We did the facilitation for the warm-up game. Now on the barrel, we are going to, let's just say we're going to teach basic seat, which is the first move for vaulting. This is where we're going to say, okay, we're going to do basic seat. Basic seat is, and explain the what, which could be basic seat is the basic position we use on the horse. It's balanced. It's the first thing we go into when we get on. We're going to sit up tall, watch where we're going. We're going to raise our hands so they're even with our eyes, point our fingers, point our toes down to the ground, wrap. So this is where we're going to give those what's, whys, and hows.
Mhm.
Then all of the students are going to have a turn to practice that on the barrel. And then we'll bring that skill to the horse. But we still keep the interactive component going. So, for example, obviously only one student is going to do this move on the horse. And interactive vaulting tends to serve larger groups, which we can talk about later as one of the benefits to the center.
Yeah.
Is so while that student might be practicing it on the horse, another student might be doing it on a barrel just outside the circle. So everybody's still practicing.
Got
We're
it.
just taking turns with the horse. Or maybe a student, we're going to decide how many steps we're going to hold it. So we're going to get in basic seat and we're going to hold this position for 15 steps. And then the circle students outside the circle, not on the horse at that moment, could help count those steps for the student that's on the horse. Oftentimes, especially with students that are a little more experienced, they'll help each other. They'll provide boosts for the student while mounting. They'll provide offside counterweight. So again, that leads into the interactive. The students are communicating with each other what they need. They'll say, hey, I want you to push my hip. Hey, I want you to give me a leg up. And so it's a very kind of non-intrusive way to work on a lot of social communication skills that a lot of those type of students are really working on building.
Yeah. And just just in what you're talking about in how you do the what, how, whys and all of that, just the body awareness and what part of my body goes where and how do we partner with the horse and all of that. Like there's so much benefit there that's happening.
Yeah. Yeah. Then from there, once we're done with that mounted portion on the horse, which is the vast majority of the lesson, we tend to do some little cool down activity where we check, we're going to check for understanding, like a wrap up you would see in the other activities offered within the Path umbrella. But again, with a focus on interactive. So one of the ones I do very frequently that's very quick and easy, and the students know it's coming, which increases their awareness for others. It teaches empathy. Again, it's communication. I ask all of the students to high five everybody in the class, and they have to tell them something they did well. And we actually teach specific praise. So, like, Susie can't high five Sally and say, you did a good job today. Susie has to high five Sally and say, I thought you did a really good job helping give me a leg up on Jenny today. Or Sally may high five Susie and say, I thought you were really brave trying that new position, even though you were scared at first. In addition to the participants all doing that with each other, they also do it with the volunteers and the horse. So it kind of really brings in the whole group. It brings in the horse. It teaches empathy, awareness, communication, gratefulness. There's lots of little key skills that are easy to build in just a 2-minute wrap-up activity.
Right, absolutely. And that would apply to anything. I mean, any group activity. I feel like that's a great takeaway for sure. So how many people are involved in a lesson? So you mentioned volunteers and you meant the instructor does the actual lunging, or does a volunteer do the lunging of the horse?
Generally, it's the instructor. There's not a path
Okay.
standard that requires that, but it is generally the instructor that does it. So one of the really cool things about interactive vaulting that I wish every center knew is how incredibly resource friendly it is. So, for example, I very commonly do interactive vaulting lessons with 4 to 6 students, sometimes more, with me, one horse, and 1 or 2 volunteers. So if you compare that to driving or riding, it requires, much more volunteer help. It requires 1 horse per participant often.
Yeah.
With interactive vaulting, it is the norm and expected to serve a whole group of participants, 1 instructor, 1 horse, 1 or 2 volunteers. Some of my older vaulting groups that are more experienced don't need a volunteer at all. They help each other.
Mm.
So it's incredibly resource friendly. And like I said, it can be bigger. We also, like I said, work with the school corporation, and interactive vaulting is great for that.
Yeah. That was my next question is how long is a typical session? It probably depends on how many you have in there.
Yeah, most vaulting lessons are built to be about an hour.
Okay.
And we don't want the horse lunging on a circle for longer than that, most certainly.
Right.
But because there's, the cool down and the warm up activities for a bigger group like that, we can build it so that it's a little bit longer lesson, but the horse isn't being lunged the whole time.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, so when you guys schedule your vaulting and stuff like with your center, you have so many other programs happening and things. And since those are a little bit longer of a session, how does that work from a logistic standpoint, scheduling? Do you kind of reserve an afternoon for that or, a day, or do you run simultaneous programming at all when you're doing interactive vaulting?
We are not, well, yes and no. Generally we don't run simultaneous programming because we only have one arena. The one exception is sometimes we will, well, we have 2 facilities. We have one arena at each facility. Sometimes we will have something happening in the barn while a group is vaulting. So for example, sometimes with larger school groups, we'll actually split them in half, and like half of the students will be in the barn reading to the horses while half of the students are in the arena working on an interactive vaulting activity, and then we'll switch. So it's one group, they're really there for one program, but there are 2 things happening at once separately.
Got it.
But we honestly, we schedule it just like we do anything else. When we sit and look at the schedule, and we place therapeutic riding lessons, we place carriage driving lessons, we place interactive vaulting lessons, the exact same. So we don't really necessarily run them, in one afternoon. And part of that is to do with the PATH standard. PATH actually, because they recognize that, lunging can be a little more taxing on some of the horses, they actually put standards in place that a horse has to have 6 hours of break between vaulting sessions. So,
Interesting.
now we have a large enough vaulting program that we have multiple vaulting horses. So I
Okay.
can do back-to-back lessons with different horses. But many centers that would only have one vaulting horse would not have the ability to stack vaulting lessons. It would have to be like one on Monday, one on Tuesday.
Yeah, that kind of a thing. Okay. So yeah, since we're talking about that a little bit, let's talk a little bit about just the equine welfare piece of vaulting and how you guys manage that. I just think about beginning riders on doing vaulting and how that can be probably a little bit unbalanced and and all of that. So how do you manage the equine welfare piece?
Yeah, so this is something I learned. So Reins, and I'm going to give you a little bit of back history in answering
Yeah.
this. Reins actually was founded in 1978, so we've been around for a hot minute. We started with therapeutic riding, and we've always done like a little bit of other stuff, some unmounted stuff, but we didn't really start diversifying our program until about 5 years ago, which is when we added first interactive vaulting and then therapeutic driving. And I have found, because at first I was like, oh, how are the horses going to manage this? This is going to be a lot to ask for horses to have dual roles. I have actually found that our horses that are more diverse and participate in more of the programs are our happiest and longest lasting horses. Now,
Sure.
obviously they can't talk to me, but here's what I think. It's cross training. They are getting different routines, they're doing different things, they get less bored, they get less frustrated. We've all seen the therapeutic riding horses that almost get a little like frustrated with people all around them, the sidewalkers, the leaders, and different skill levels of those people.
Mhm.
The cool thing about interactive vaulting is the horse is lunged by the instructor, who that horse has a relationship with. We've worked together. In theory, hopefully the instructor is a very skilled lunger. So the horse is not getting the mixed signals that can be frustrating. It's very clear. Expectations are clear. And a lot of it comes down to selecting and training the right horses. So the reality is you're unlikely to get a horse that's trained for vaulting donated to your program. It's just
Yeah.
not that big of a sport. Well, it's possible, it's not probable. So center is probably going to have to look within their own herd, or maybe look outside the herd and source a horse with this specific discipline in mind. So a lot of that is going to come into choosing the right horse. And what does the right horse look like? There is a body type for sure. We're moving around up there. We want, a broad back with enough space. So, we've had the most success here with gypsy, halflinger, draft crosses as our vaulting horses to kind of give us the room to move. A narrow thoroughbred, while it might have the right attitude and temperament, might be more challenging for those students to move around on, which then would make it more challenging for the horse if the students are struggling up there. And, the lunging, if it's done very thoughtfully, honestly, our vaulting horses are some of our fittest horses because
Right.
they are lunged very correctly on an ongoing basis. They tend to be fit and have better top lines, stuff like that. And then, yes, the equipment comes into play as well. Vaulting pads are shocking in their effectiveness. Like I was like, I don't believe that like these little knees aren't hurting. So like
Yeah.
I've done like, let me put my hand in here and put some pressure on. The pads are really, really effective. They're pricey, but effective.
Yeah.
And equipment choice, comes into play too. Like there are different vaulting surcingles. We have made it a point that our vaulting surcingles have trees in them rather than being flexible.
Yeah.
And that they fit the horses, because as the students are moving around and putting pressure, if it's a flexible tree, it is going to, dig in and create uneven pressure on the horse. Where if it is again, a solid, well-fit surcingle, that's going to protect the horse too. So there's lots of different pieces that go into the welfare of the horses. It starts with selection, training, equipment, fitness. And I actually, I found our horses that are working in different programs have tended to be our happiest, longest lasting ones.
Mm. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. I think horses, like you said, like that cross training effect, kind of where they get a little bit of different stuff every day or all the time, and that helps keep their brains busy. I think that's fantastic. Um, so we talked about, well, quick question before we talk about that. Would you say that you deal with more back soreness in your vaulting horses than other horses, or is it the same thing as a, riding horse? You have the right tack and you do the right things, and it's as long as you're doing what you're supposed to do, you don't deal with back soreness.
Yeah, I would not say that it's any higher incidence than our riding or driving or anything else.
Awesome.
And we do, have a chiropractor that regularly comes to our barn. One of our staff members is certified in massage. So we do look at those things and utilize different components, and, are kind of checking our horses on regular schedules for those things and providing care. And I would say there is definitely no higher rate of occurrence in our vaulting horses than in anything else.
I love
If
that.
anything, again, and I think it comes part to fitness and the horses, the body type we've selected to start with that have stronger, better backs and top lines. If anything, our vaulting horses are some of the ones we have to work on less frequently. But I don't necessarily know that that's vaulting, but type.
Yeah, type of horse for sure. So special tacket equipment for the vaulting, which I need to feel a vaulting pad. I need to get my hands on one. So I have to go find one. But what kind of equipment do the participants wear? Do they wear anything
Yes.
special or anything like that?
Um, yes, actually, and I think this freaks a lot of horse people out. But again, because we are moving around and toes are going and we may stand on the horse, we actually don't want boots. Like in past training, they say is there like a footwear policy. So they can buy specific vaulting shoes, but vaulting shoes are very just like soft, almost like dance shoes. A lot of our participants actually use like swim shoes for vaulting.
Oh, okay.
So
That makes
you want
sense.
a soft, flexible shoe.
With a little bit of traction, a
Yep,
little bit of grip. Yeah.
yep. They are moving around up there. So most of my students come in leggings, their swim or vaulting shoes, if they have actually purchased vaulting shoes, though we generally suggest swim shoes. But some of the students are all in, especially the ones that have gone to the competitions and they've gotten the stuff.
Yeah.
Um, and so leggings, generally a comfortable but not too loose top. And then we want their hair contained. PATH does actually have a standard where if interactive vaulting students meet certain criteria, they can remove the helmet, because at some point with certain skills, when you get a certain level, the helmet actually provides more of a risk than a benefit. However,
Interesting.
at Reins, we're still putting helmets on our students' heads.
Yeah.
But there is a possibility within PATH for that to be removed.
Okay. Okay.
Um,
Um,
and and because I think people are like, oh my gosh, no helmet swim shoes, that seems unsafe. I do want to interject here that vaulting is statistically the safest equestrian sport that one can participate in. And not
Interesting.
just, of course, there are fewer accidents because fewer people are doing it, but like, let's say it's so many out of 100 participants are injured. Vaulting has lower numbers than any other equestrian sport. And here's my theory as to why. One, most equestrian accidents occur because someone is overmounted, they lose control. With interactive vaulting, the instructor is always the one directing the horse. So it's not left to a student who might be overmounted. The horses are highly trained. And in addition to that, we teach the students to get off moving horses almost immediately. So students know how to get off, and if something happens, they don't have to try to stop the horse. All they have to do is worry about either holding themselves on or getting off while the instructor worries about the horse.
Mhm.
So I think it just generally creates an environment where accidents and injuries are much less likely to occur.
Yeah, especially if you think about the consistency of just the nature of it as well, in the lunging and the what you're doing. I mean, a horse is less likely to be surprised by anything happening because that consistency is there.
Yeah.
This episode is sponsored by Killian Insurance Agency. Killian Insurance Agency proudly serves the EAS and EAP communities, offering insurance solutions tailored to your unique needs. They provide coverage for therapy horses, equipment, camps, events, and facilities while addressing the specific liability concerns of your programs. Whether you operate an EAS center, provide EAP services, or manage a ranch or farm without these programs, they're here to protect your work. If you're new to the EAS or EAP industry, they can guide you through the coverage process. Contact Killian Insurance Agency today to discuss how they can help safeguard your critical impact that you make on individuals and communities. Find them at www.farmequineinsurance.com or at the link in the show notes. So are there weight limits for participants in vaulting the way there is for mounted activities, traditional mounted activities?
There are, absolutely. And while the official weight limit for us is the same as with mounted, that general 20% rule that we adjust down from as needed, I would say with vaulting, it while that's the official weight limit, we tend to move students to larger horses a little bit sooner, simply because they're moving around more on top. It does impact, I think, center of gravity a little more readily than riding, where a student is a little bit more stationary on the horse's back. Plus, with vaulting, in addition to weight of participant, you need to think about body length and length of horse's back. So I've found that with us, we have a participant get too tall for a horse before they get too heavy for the horse.
Interesting, yeah.
They run out of length of back to move around. Like their torso and body are too long and they don't have enough room to do what they need to do on that horse's back with the different positions they're learning. So we tend to upgrade students for height reasons before we do for weight reasons,
Hmm.
simply because of the nature of what they're doing up there.
Yeah, that makes sense. I wouldn't have never thought about that, but that totally makes sense. They're not, yeah, they don't have as much room. Or if you have really long legs or something, I could see that
Yeah.
being tricky while you're up there,
Yep.
for sure. So, are there any like you've been in this industry a long time, you're obviously a very well accomplished interactive vaulting instructor. What are your like bugaboos or pet peeves in like the vaulting community? Or like, like how sometimes I feel like as a therapist, I'll see photos on Facebook that I'm like, ooh, that's cringy, or things like that. Like, do you have any pet peeves about the industry as a whole?
I, I think for vaulting, one of my things is equipment, because I've seen the difference really quality equipment has made for our horses. Um, and I think horse selection and training from the get-go.
Yeah.
Because I think while vaulting has been very successful for us, and yes, we talked about those are very successful horses and they don't have the back problems. I could see how if the right horse selections and training and equipment weren't all in place, that it can be very challenging for a horse to participate in this activity. Though I
Mhm.
think done well, it's a benefit, not a negative.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the same with any, activity in our industry is that when it's done well and well thought out and, all of that, it's very safe and practical. But there are, people out there that probably don't always, check all the boxes before that happens. And then here we are with a bad rap on all of us kind of thing. So it's just like honestly doing this podcast or anything else, like you doing the education to help spread the word about a lot of those things to keep that bar raising higher and higher, right? How do you even get into being a interactive vaulting instructor? I think that's kind of I haven't seen a ton of trainings in our area at least. So what does that look like?
Yeah, so, and this is another thing I want everybody to know, so I'm really glad you asked. Um, the reality is very few of us within Path under this umbrella have experience with vaulting. Um, and I think because we don't have experience, we don't necessarily have a knowledge of what it is, what the expectations are. Um, I, for example, was in an advanced certification prep course, and the faculty for that, like, watched me teach, was like, you should be a vaulting instructor. I laughed at her and said, "Do I look like I do gymnastics on horses? Because I don't." Um, and it took her like 2 years to be like, "No, you clearly don't understand what this is. You should be doing this. This suits your teaching style." And finally I was like, "Okay, well, let's give this some thought and some dig in." Because I had no vaulting history, and let me just tell you, I do not belong doing gymnastics on horseback. That is not me or who I am.
Mhm.
Um, but I dug in, and you don't really have to have interactive vaulting experience. There are elements of vaulting that you will need to be able to perform by the time you certify. You will have to be able to demonstrate some very basic vaulting positions on a vaulting barrel at the
Mhm.
certification. And you'll also have to be able to teach those positions, explain the what, why, and how, focus on empathy and kindness to the horse while you're doing this, um, give the specific praise. So there are elements of vaulting that you will have to learn and be able to perform to some degree. But I am not athletic. I have never done gymnastics, and I was able to do it. So it is, I think, more attainable than people think, and they shouldn't let them scare you away. Now, until just a couple of years ago, with the interactive vaulting certification within Path, you had to do the workshop first, then go away and practice, and then come back and certify. Because there aren't a lot of vaulting mentors out there. Path only has about 40 certified interactive vaulting instructors under their umbrella,
Oh,
according to
wow.
their numbers and statistics. Um, so it can be hard to get the information you need to be successful at certification. Now, because of the challenges of people saying, well, I can't go twice. It makes it too expensive. There aren't a lot of certification opportunities. Path did recently change, and you now can do the workshop and the certification together. But I do recommend that you only do that if you are working with another certified interactive vaulting instructor who can help guide you, get you lunging correctly, because interactive vaulting lunging does look different than many other types of lunging. It's very specific. There's very specific ways we're communicating with the horse and asking it what we need. We have to rely on voice a little less because as the instructor, I'm lunging. So while I am lunging the horse, I'm also talking to the students and giving
Right.
them directions and making corrections. So interactive vaulting for the horse is very, very finely focused on body language and cues. And then there's even the fact that interactive vaulting lessons are different than the other activities under Path International's umbrella, with that kind of emphasis on the facilitation while still having elements of the teaching and the what, whys, and hows. So while you can do it all in one go, I still recommend to people that they do the workshop and then go practice and get the hours they need and then do the certification, with the exception of if you are working with another interactive vaulting instructor who can mentor you, then you can do it all in one go. Okay.
Yeah. And that makes sense. I think having that person to go home and troubleshoot with is really, really important. But as you mentioned, there aren't, that many. So that just being able to probably, one of the first barriers is just finding a program you can go see it and maybe volunteer in it, or you know what I mean? That kind of a thing, even
Yep.
observe is
Yeah.
probably a little bit tricky.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it is very tricky. And then even once you're invested in the certifications don't happen very often.
Right.
I actually believe that Reins of Life, which is my center, is the only one who has hosted a workshop and certification in the last 5 years, I think. And we've done
Wow.
several, and we've got another upcoming one. We're actually doing one in June. So I'm happy to share details. Anybody
Yeah.
that is interested in that, feel free to share my email address. They can reach out. I can get them details, even if it's just coming to the workshop this time around, getting the knowledge to then
Yeah.
go practice. Um,
And I was
but yeah,
talking
so
with,
so that can be a barrier. Finding the mentors, finding somebody to help get you on the way, finding somebody to even explain what it is, because like myself, somebody asked me to do it, and
right.
I thought that was the most ridiculous thing I'd ever heard. But once I learned and invested, it's incredible, and I really think that most centers should be looking at adding it to their programs because it is so resource friendly. It so effectively serves certain populations and groups. I really think it's a benefit, and it's worth the little bit of trouble to get the knowledge and
Yeah.
get it going.
Yeah, absolutely. I was talking with Amy Causey from eQuest on a podcast here not that long ago, and she was kind of talking about the same thing with driving, where it's hard to host a certification because you have to have multiple horses and multiple, just you have to have all of the equipment to do all of this stuff. And so I'm sure with such a robust program, you guys are perfectly outfitted to do that, but lots probably aren't, have one horse or two, and that makes it
Yeah,
tricky.
yeah.
Do other organizations offer interactive vaulting certification, or is Path International kind of the only one on the market right now?
So CHA has a vaulting instructor certification, but it is not necessarily geared towards participants with disabilities, interactive,
Okay.
adaptive. It is just a more blanket vaulting certification.
Okay.
Um, to my knowledge, those are really the only two in the US. Like EVUSA, the Equestrian Vaulting USA organization, has coaches, but there isn't a specific training or certification for that. So like when I started taking students to competition, I paid a membership fee. I said I was our club's coach, and away we went. Now, I
Yeah.
did reach out to other competitive coaches who were happy to help me get us going in the right way because, like I said, I have no competition experience in vaulting.
Right.
But there were no requirements, no training, no specific certifications. It was just I signed us up as a club and paid our monies and said I was the coach.
There you go. That's the way it is for lots of things. So that's all right. Very good. Okay, well that's good. I mean, I'm honestly the barrier to entry is, fairly low as long as you can find a place to do it. That's all part of
Yeah,
it. So,
yeah.
okay, perfect. So yes, I do want you to share a little more information about, so you guys are hosting a workshop in June. you said, right?
Yes.
How many days is that? What does that look like?
Yeah. Yeah, so it's the Path International OSWC situation.
Okay.
So the workshop is June 18th or June 16th through the 18th,
Okay.
and the certification is the 19th and the 20th. So like I
Okay.
said, if you have worked with somebody or you've already attended a workshop, you can come do the whole thing. But I very frequently encourage people to separate them. You come learn exactly what you need to do. One of the really cool things about the interactive vaulting workshop that I think is a little different than the other workshops is how hands-on it is. So the participants actually practice lunging with the faculty watching them multiple times throughout the workshop
Oh,
with multiple horses. And one of the other cool things that happens at the interactive vaulting workshops for PATH is the faculty will actually bring in students and teach interactive vaulting lessons for the participants to see and discuss.
oh, that's
So
awesome.
they will actually get to see interactive vaulting lessons. They will get to lunge the interactive vaulting horses and get feedback from the faculty. There's also a time where we practice the moves, the positions they'll have to do for certification on the vaulting barrel. So all of the things that will happen in the actual testing, they're going to get to see and practice during the workshop, which I think is a little different than some of the other path workshops.
Yeah, for sure. And that just keeps lending itself to the interactive part, right?
Yeah.
Um, so is there a certain amount of hours that you have to have or anything before you can attend a workshop or that kind of thing?
Um, yes and no. So to attend the workshop, you have to do the online stuff. You have to, have your first aid CPR, that kind of stuff, but you don't have to have specific hours. Prior to testing, you do have to have logged hours. I believe it's 30 and 20. I believe it's 30 lunging and 20 teaching interactive vaulting, though it's possible I have those swapped. But it's
Sorry.
30-20, so a total of 50 hours. And as of now, for the Path International certification, you do already have to hold your CTRI or
Okay.
your advanced or master. However,
Important to know.
I'm also on the interactive vaulting certification subcommittee, and we are currently putting other pieces in place to be able to remove that so it's one less barrier for people. So at this point in time, you do have to be a certified riding instructor through PATH, though we are working on taking that out.
Okay. And just probably adding some other,
Yep.
objectives or
Some
something
other
to kind of make that easier.
experiences and
That
yep.
makes sense. Okay. Very good. Okay, I can't even begin to explain to you how much I learned today. I think entering this conversation, I was a little bit like, whoa, interactive vaulting, this seems like really complicated and tricky and a little bit scary to me. But you made it so easy for me to understand and honestly see all the benefits of it that I mean the pros way outweigh the cons, I think.
I do, and like I said, I was a skeptic. It took somebody working me for 2 years, because I I didn't understand it enough to see the benefits. And even though I was aware there surely was some, I wasn't sure I was the right person. Um,
Yeah.
but I do think it's a very good discipline and activity for centers to add if they can, because of the resource friendliness, because of how well it serves particular participants. It has benefited our horses. Honestly, as someone who's kind of been in this as a lifer, it's given me my more diversity, and I think helped keep me fresher as an instructor. Um, so so yeah, I and it does, if you kind of have a facilitative teaching style, interactive vaulting really does lend itself well to that style of teaching.
I like that kind of looking at it from development from an instructor part as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
Is your interactive vaulting program generally full all the time? I mean, do you have a wait list or is it, what does that kind of look like as far as participant availability for you?
Um, our program in general has a general wait list, and then we try to fit people in. So there
Yeah.
are students who would like to be interactive vaulting who right now are riding or there are students who want to ride that are actually in interactive vaulting because they're appropriate there, and we had a lesson they fit in there, but not riding. So it's hard to say specifically that we have a interactive vaulting wait list or that it's full, but
Yeah.
there are participants who would like to be doing it that aren't, and also some students that didn't necessarily ask to do it that are, but then have found really great success there. We had one student who really wanted to ride, but we didn't have an appropriate lesson for her. We popped her into interactive vaulting. She did that for a couple of seasons. And then we did have an opening in therapeutic riding, and that is what she wanted to do. So we switched her over into therapeutic riding because that's what she wanted. She did that for one season and then was back in interactive vaulting because therapeutic riding was too boring.
That's funny. That's a success
So
story. I love that.
yeah, so it's kind of an interesting dynamic of I don't know that we specifically have a wait list, but we kind of do.
Yeah. How many participants a week does Reins serve per week? Just ballpark.
Okay, so most of our participants come on a weekly basis. However, with our school groups,
Oh,
because
right.
we are contracted for so many classes, those classes only come once a month. So we see like 3 school groups from LaPorte Community Schools a week. But because we're seeing so many, we only see them once a month. So it's better to give you a monthly figure. Each
Okay.
month, we see about 450 unique participants,
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
most of whom are coming weekly, but some who are coming through the school program that we see once a month.
That makes sense. That sounds like a great opportunity too. Very good. Okay. Well, this has been awesome, Amanda. I really appreciate you taking the time to share all this with me. Do you have any other, parting things that you really want people to know about interactive vaulting or that we missed?
No, I mean just really don't let it scare you because you don't have a background in vaulting, because I did not, and it's really become one of my passions.
I love that. Very good. All right. Well, before I let you go, I always ask my guests a wrap-up question, and that is, what is your golden rule, or how do you strive to live your life kind of every day, Amanda?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, I think in general, I am pretty passionate about making a positive impact on as many people around me as I can. So that would be kind of my general golden rule. At work, if I had a golden rule, it's really in the past 5 years become program diversification, and how much I believe in that. And I genuinely believe every center and every instructor should be looking at ways they can diversify, even if it's not like, okay, I've gone all the ways. So I will have one week, like one day, where I will teach a ground lesson, a riding lesson, then 2 vaulting lessons, and then a driving lesson. Even if you're not doing that, if you can add one piece, I think it serves our horses, our volunteers, our students, and our staff all in different ways to add that diversity. It keeps it interesting. It allows us to play to strengths. And so program diversification has really kind of become my golden rule within the equine assisted services field.
I love that. I think that's really great advice for people, especially those that, like you said, only teach, maybe they're only adaptive riding instructors and that's what they do all day long. And that might be what you're really passionate about, but sometimes diversifying just a little bit can help things stay fresh and obviously we're all about sustainability in this industry. And if that's what helps us, stay sustainable and not burn out for everybody, our horses, our participants, our staff, then that's what we're after. So that's awesome. All right. Well, thank you. I will link the information to the your guys' interactive vaulting workshop in the show notes. So go down and click on that if you're listening and learn more about it. And I will also link Reins of Life, excuse me, right?
Reins
In
of
there
life.
as of life, yeah, so that you can connect with Amanda or check out their program and learn a little bit more. So I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks for having me, and thanks for sharing information with everybody.
Absolutely.
That's all for today. But until the next episode launches,
Scroll down to the show notes and click on the link to get plugged in with us on Facebook, Instagram, or our exclusive educational club at Patreon. This podcast is presented by Hetra University, the educational arm of Heartland Equine Therapeutic Riding Academy in Gretna, Nebraska. Hetra University's mission is to provide high-quality educational offerings to the EAS community. Check out all the Hetra University has to offer at www.hetrauniversity.org.